The world is full of fearless, risk-taking adventure seekers in search of a rousing rush of adrenaline. Daredevils defy the very limits of humankind daily. These venturers are constantly pushing the envelope in search of that sudden surge of dopamine. The sky's the limit when it comes to overcoming one's own obstacles. Ultimately, it's all about leaving your comfort zone and
living on the edge.
We'll explore extreme sports on this week's episode of FYI. Welcome to For Your Info.
En inglés.
You got it. Hello, and welcome to another exciting episode of FYI. Today's show is for you adrenaline junkies, those of you who are looking for a fix. You're craving something more. And if you were paying attention, I ended last week's episodes on drugs talking about dopamine. Well, today we're going to talk a lot about dopamine, adrenaline, and all those chemicals. Those chemicals that make us feel good, the ones that put us in a great mood. And they remind us that we're alive and kicking. So today we're going to tackle extreme sports. And we're even going to hear from one of my students, Carmen. She's an interstellar student, and her favorite pastime is skydiving. So she's going to give us a first-hand account of what skydiving is like. Let's kick off today's show with our intro. I always like to sprinkle some great vocabulary words in there for my amigos. I started off by saying the world is full of fearless, risk-taking adventure seekers. Wow, that's a mouthful. Let's unpack it piece by piece. The world is full of fearless. Fearless means you are not afraid of anything. I ain't afraid of no ghosts. If you're fearful, it's the opposite. It's always good to learn synonyms and antonyms of words. So fearless versus fearful. And somebody who takes risks is a risk taker. An adventure seeker. And to seek is to look for something. Just be careful, it's a very irregular verb. It's seek, sought, sought. So adventure seekers are in search of a rousing rush of adrenaline. And rousing means exciting, emotionally exciting, just like many extreme sports are. I mean, that's the reason people get into them, right? They're chasing that adrenaline rush. And a rush in this case is una subida, una descarga. Then I said, daredevils defy the very limits of humankind daily. And a daredevil is somebody who's not afraid to try anything. And to defy is to go against, desafiar or retar in Spanish. Then I said, these venturers, and that's interesting because you can say adventurers or venturers. And to venture is to dare to go somewhere. It means to take a risk. A lot of times when we talk about a business, we talk about a venture. Have you heard about his new venture? That means his new project, his new ambition, his new business. But it usually implies taking a risk. It's a great word if you didn't know it. Venture. And it's got the T and the U. Venture, nature, Portugal, future, situation. I hope you repeated all those with me. You can add your own to the list. And these venturers are constantly pushing the envelope. And to push the envelope is to go beyond our horizons. And they are in search of a sudden surge of dopamine. And a surge is similar to a rush. Then I said, the sky's the limit. I love that idiomatic expression. It really means there are no limits. To infinity and beyond, as Buzz Lightyear would say. And the next word is a really good verb, to overcome, superar. And I think the word obstacle is pretty obvious, obstáculo. You can also say the word hurdles. We're going to learn a lot of great vocabulary today. And I wrapped up the intro saying, ultimately, it's all about leaving your comfort zone. And then I got the help of Steven Tyler from Aerosmith. Living on the edge. Do you like to play it safe, or do you like to live on the edge? Well, either way, we'll explore extreme sports today. Now let's look at the origin of the term sports versus extreme sports, because the word sports has been around for ages. But the term extreme sports, they say, first appeared in the 1950s. Now it's been wrongly attributed to Ernest Hemingway. The quote is, "There are only 3 sports: bullfighting, motor racing, and mountaineering. All the rest are merely games." However, it was not Ernest Hemingway who said that. It was another writer named Ken Purdy, and the quote appeared in 1957. So as always, let's start out by defining the topic. Action sports, adventure sports, or extreme sports are activities perceived as involving a high degree of risk. These activities often involve speed, height, I want everybody to pronounce that one with me, height, a high level of physical exertion, and highly specialized gear. The word gear is equipo in Spanish. It's all the stuff you need to do that sport. It goes on to say, extreme tourism overlaps with extreme sport. To overlap, I think in Spanish, is solapar. The two share the same main attraction, adrenaline rush caused by an element of risk, and differ mostly in the degree of engagement and professionalism. As with many definitions, there's a gray area. More recently, the term extreme sport has spread everywhere, and it's often used to describe a multitude of different activities. Now, exactly which sports are considered extreme is debatable, but there are several characteristics common to most extreme sports. Extreme sports tend to have a younger than average target demographic. Also, they are rarely sanctioned by schools for their PE curriculum. PE is how we say physical education. They also tend to be more solitary than many of the popular traditional sports. But as always, there are exceptions to every rule. And there are new extreme sports popping up every day. Another thing that makes something an extreme sport is the higher number of inherently uncontrollable variables. Variables such as weather and terrain, wind, snow, water, mountains. And since Mother Nature cannot be controlled, well, this adds a lot of uncertainty to the outcome. It elevates the risk level. But then again, isn't that what we want? Isn't that why everybody's trying to hike up Everest? By the way, we have an episode on Mount Everest. If you haven't listened to it, give it a listen. So we looked at where the term came from and more or less when. But who were the pioneers? Well, many of these sports have existed for generations. Sports such as rock climbing and ice climbing. They've even produced famous athletes such as Edmund Hillary, if you remember him in the Mount Everest episode, and Kilian Jornet. So there's a whole business and a marketing machine behind it. And we're going to talk about when that turning point was, because these sports, as many things do, start out on the fringe. And then they get very popular. They catch on. And some obviously get more popular than others, as with skateboarding. Also, you can't ask for a better spokesperson than Tony Hawk, but we'll hear from him later. Another sport that's considered extreme is surfing. Sure, have you seen the size of some of those waves? And don't forget about the reefs below. And surfing is not a new sport. It was invented centuries ago by the inhabitants of Polynesia. And as many of you know, in Hawaii, it's the national sport. So it started with adventurers, risk takers. But also there was something called the Dangerous Sports Club of Oxford University, England. And this was founded by a couple of guys, and they wanted to take risks. They saw modern sports, tennis, basketball as boring, mundane, ordinary even. And they were thirsty for more. They wanted to up the ante, to raise the stakes. Sure, the more you risk, the higher your adrenaline goes up. So this club in Oxford University came to the attention of the general public when they invented modern-day bungee jumping. I know in Spanish you say puenting. We don't call it bridging, we call it bungee jumping. The reason is the cord is called a bungee cord. And the first modern bungee jumps were on April 1st, 1979. They were done from the Clifton Suspension Bridge in Bristol, England. Other club activities included hang gliding. But wait, that's not all. Hang gliding from active volcanoes. And they were also there in the early years of base jumping. So you could say these guys were definitely pioneers. Oh, and we might as well start talking about all the different kinds. We'll start with base jumping. Base stands for building, antennas, spans, and earth. And those are the 4 different things you will jump off of. It's different from parachuting or skydiving because you don't jump out of an airplane. You jump from fixed objects. But base jumpers only carry one parachute. They say that base jumping is significantly more hazardous than other forms of parachuting. And it's widely considered to be one of the most dangerous extreme sports. One of the most popular extreme sports is skateboarding. And I know what you're thinking. You're thinking skateboarding? Well, my little cousin does that. Yeah, but as with every sport, there's skateboarding and then there's skateboarding. If you've ever seen Tony Hawk on a half-pipe, you'll see that it's true. Humans can fly. And Tony Hawk was one of the pioneers. Not only did he make skateboarding popular, but he also paved the way for other extreme sports. And even the X Games, which we'll talk about a little bit later on. But right now, we're going to hear from a young Tony Hawk in 1987. I don't think he could have imagined in his wildest dreams how popular skateboarding would become. Let's hear from a young Tony Hawk.
Behold the amazing skateboard, one of the few toys capable of turning parents prematurely gray, sending kids off the wall, and medical bills into the wild blue yonder, sometimes all at once. 25 years ago, it started out as one more of those California fads. Now, it's the sleeper gift of Christmas '87. Popular, and most times priced that way.
Pro boards range from $100 to $140. And when they buy the board, that's only one of the components.
Right. Throw in things like wheels and bearings and the gizmos to hold everything together, and you can spend $200 of mom's and dad's money in no time. And that doesn't include protective padding, helmets, t-shirts, and stickers. The lure, of course, is to defy gravity, hopefully with style, just like the skateboard pros do. 19-year-old Tony Hawk is king of the cult, inventor of such maneuvers as the 720, that's 2 midair somersaults, the Madonna, and the Frigidaire. Between appearances and sales of his own boards, he earns in excess of $150,000 a year. Skateboards have been very, very good to Tony.
Yeah, for me it has been. I bought a house, a condominium in Carlsbad.
The sport has developed its own language, which to the uninitiated sounds like dialogue from an Arnold Schwarzenegger movie.
I just like, stoking other people out, if you know what stoking means.
Let's go down to Venice. Something happened in slide and roll curves, or...
Sorry, bro, they're all secrets.
Predictably, perhaps, skateboarding has its own videos, too. And its popularity has spread to Japan, the 3rd major market after the U.S. and Canada, where body jumping is the in thing to do. But if all this puts you off, consider this youthful wisdom.
We could be doing worse things. We could be doing drugs, we could be in gangs and stuff, but this is our way of fun, skateboarding. It's pretty cool.
Wow, those were the days. It just took me back to the 1980s. And I have a Tony Hawk right here in my office in the studio right next to me. And as I said before, there's skateboarding and then there's skateboarding. Well, I do the first one, not the Tony Hawk one. Another person who was a skateboarder and snowboarder, Shaun White. He's another guy who was a pioneer in paving the way for extreme sports. An extremely popular one is skydiving. For young people, it's almost become a rite of passage. I remember going skydiving when I was a little kid. Well, little kid, I had to be over 18. I was a lot younger than I am now. And I remember it being one of the most amazing experiences of my life. And it wasn't just the adrenaline that I felt running through my veins for 3 days, but it was also the night before, those nervous jitters, thinking, is something going to go wrong or is it going to be okay? So there's that whole psychological element as well. And that's why you have to psych yourself up. And to psych yourself up is to get in the right mindset. I think you say mentalizarse. I've only skydived once, but it was one of the most memorable experiences of my life. And somebody who is no stranger to skydiving is Carmen. Carmen is one of my students. She's an amazing student, a great person, and it's an honor to have her in our curious community. And she has gone to Florida and trained there. She comes to Madrid to train. She takes it serious. As we say, she means business. Let's hear from Carmen.
Hey amigos, skydiving's been the most blissful experience in my life, but also the most difficult skill I've ever learned. I have to push not only my physical abilities, but also my mental abilities. I became a skydiver through an AFF course. AFF stands for Accelerated Freefall, that is a rapid and safe progression in just 8 jumps. After a 2 days ground school learning, I was trained on safety and emergency procedures, safety freefall maneuvers, canopy piloting, and canopy landing. And then I was ready to do my first skydive. My 2 instructors and me jumped out of the aircraft at an altitude of 4,500 meters. They were hanging onto my harness, and during the freefall, I had to complete the exercises I was trained for, always under their supervision. The freefall speed is around 200 kilometers per hour. I'll never forget my very first jump. My brain didn't know what to experience. I was locked up for about 2 seconds. It was a nerve-wracking, too much sensory overload. After a freefall of 60 seconds, I reached the opening altitude at 1,500 meters, and I deployed my canopy by pulling the handle out. And then the canopy opened, and I was on cloud 9. I couldn't believe I was up there, riding my canopy in the sky and feeling the fresh air on my face. Then I piloted the canopy to the ground, and eventually I got a safe canopy landing. When I completed my course and I got my license, I started to feel that I was the goddess of the universe. Now, 30 years later, I'm still spending all the time improving my abilities. Sometimes I feel in heaven when I get my exercise well done, but sometimes I feel frustrated during the learning process because it takes me a lot of time practicing again and again just to achieve a simple body position during the freefall. By the way, the same thing I feel with the English learning process too. But the rewards I get in return every time I jump or every time I master a word in English, it's worth it.
Wow, Carmen, you sounded great. And you know what? Even though I've got a bad knee, I'm thinking about going skydiving again. Just don't tell my wife or my insurance company. I'm sure Carmen knows this as well, but some of the coolest places to skydive, down in Florida, in the United States, in Key West, also in the Swiss Alps. Byron Bay in Australia is another amazing location. I did it in New Jersey. It is still one of the most memorable days of my life. Other extreme sports, the Ironman triathlon. You say triathlon, we say triathlon. A shout out to one of my students born to Ironman. He's done many Ironman competitions. Hey, I'm sending a lot of shout outs to my students, and I forgot to send a shout out to all my patrons. So a shout out to all of you who are in my curious community, including Carmen and Born to Ironman, and all of you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Let's continue to learn and laugh together. And if you want to join my curious community, take a look. Go to patreon.com/Alberto Alonso and find out what you're missing out on. You can get bonus episodes every week, PDF documents with all the vocabulary, review classes, and even private classes with me. All the information is over at patreon.com/Alberto Alonso. And I'd like to send a shout out to all my patrons, especially my super duper students, Marta, Javier, Paco, Roberto, and Mila. And don't forget about my interstellar students, Carmen, Lina, Isa, Paco, David, Jose Maria, Patricio, and Edgar. Keep up the great work, guys. And if you want more information, go to patreon.com/Alberto Alonso for more information. In fact, now they have a function on Patreon where you can join for free. Now, I don't know if you have access to all the content, but at least you'll be in the loop. All right, where were we with our extreme sports? Oh, right, Ironman. Another one that's become very popular, kite surfing. This is one that's done around Spain, especially in Cádiz. I guess you need a lot of wind to do this one. And you need some serious muscles, too. And you need a kite. And not just any kite, not the one you bring to the park. So that's another thing, too. You're not just investing time and energy, but also money on equipment. A parachute is not cheap. A kite is not cheap. Not the ones used in kite surfing. And obviously the word kite is cometa. Then you've got other water ones, such as snorkeling or scuba diving. We already briefly mentioned snowboarding and skiing. Sure, you can just go down the bunny hills, or you can go where no man has gone before. We mentioned rock climbing and ice climbing. You've got some motor sports such as motocross. I don't know very much about this, but I gotta say I love it when they do Supermans. It's just a really cool trick. Then you've got jet skiing and snowmobiling, wakeboarding, which we can learn the word wake, estela there. And it's not just in the literal sense, but it's also in the figurative sense. In the wake of the current events, I know a lot of people who do wakeboarding in the north of Madrid. You've also got BMX, bobsleigh, hang gliding, parkour. That's cool because you're using the environment. And I think my favorite one is extreme ironing. I know you've seen pictures of this one. The way it works is people take their ironing board and an iron to a remote location and they iron an item of clothing. So just imagine you're on the top of Mulhacén in Sierra Nevada with your ironing board ironing your dress shirt. But make sure you get a picture. I'm serious, folks. There's even a Wikipedia page on extreme ironing. And they give away trophies. Move over, Iron Man. It's time for extreme ironing. Well, I doubt you're going to get hurt ironing. It's getting there. That's the extreme part. But none of these sports would have been as popular as they are today without television, without mass media. And that came in the 1990s. I'm sure many of you are familiar with the X Games. They were founded by ESPN, which is now owned by Disney, and they had different disciplines: skateboarding, BMX, motocross, skiing, and snowboarding. At that time, none of those were Olympic categories. And the inaugural X Games were held during the summer of 1995. I'll never forget it. I was graduating high school. I thought it was a great idea. And in the 90s, it was all about extreme. Everything started with an X, even the Generation X. And they took place in Providence and Newport in Rhode Island. One of the coolest things about the X Games, it's where they push the envelope and invent new tricks. such as Tony Hawk's 900 or Shaun White's double McTwist 1260, which is a snowboard trick that had not been done before. And Tony's was obviously a skateboarding trick. The good thing is those two are pals. Also, the double backflip in the BMX, that was done for the first time at the X Games by Travis Pastrana. And I think it has snowballed, pun intended. But now there's a lot of money in extreme sports. Just ask Red Bull. And we're going to hear from Felix Baumgartner in the bonus episode. We're also going to take a look at some of the most extreme sports and where to do them. We'll take a look at the worst accidents in extreme sports. We'll also take a look at a shocking survival story. And, of course, some idioms. All of that in the bonus episode. And if you're not a patron, you are missing out. So sign up now. I hate to be a pest, but it's worth it. So whether you like adventure sports or not, there's one thing that we can't deny. They are on the rise. Every day, adventurers are pushing the limits to go where no human has gone before. And you, my amigos, you too, but only you're English explorers, exploring the English language every week with a different topic. And don't forget, if you haven't heard a topic you'd like to hear about, just let me know. We're going to wrap up here, but I sure hope you'll join us in the bonus episode of this week's FYI.